Hey there, and welcome to another Nerdy Reviews. I'm the absolute nerd, but you can call me Briston, and today we're going to be reviewing Gundam Build Fighters Try. Now, before I begin, if you haven't already, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment down below. I want to hear from you guys about this series, whether you like it or not, or if you agree with my opinions. I'm just making it awkward. Anyways, let's go ahead and begin with the review here. So let's go ahead and begin with the story here. The story takes place 7 years after the end of Build Fighters. We follow our characters here, Fumina Hoshino, Sekai Kamiki, and Sei Iori as they join together as the Tri Fighters and compete in the 13th Gunpla Battle Tournament. Just like the first series itself, it's very straightforward with the story. It doesn't really deviate from that and doesn't get too crazy with it as well. This is a 25 episode series that originally aired in Japan on October 8th of 2014, a year, not quite a year, but a little bit a year after the first series aired. Honestly, when I was talking about Build Fighters, I was kind of like scattered in thought because my notes were kind of scattered. It was much more scattered because I don't have a whole lot to say about the series because it's like, it feels like any other traditional anime, right? It feels like watching a regular anime series. It's not like watching a Gundam series where there's so much to really dive into. There is more. There's not enough substance in each of these series. They're literally like snacks compared to like a full course meal. Where with a Gundam series, there's a lot to, digress and really dive into with like the lore, what's going around the world, characters, symbolisms, themes, those sort of things. And with the Build Fighter series, it's very straightforward, it's very clear cut. It's telling a story, it has its characters, and it's really more so focused on having fun with the material, right? And it's not really concerning itself trying to tell this overarching story. It's not really concerned with itself trying to relay to you a message or tie things in together. So I think that's something that's really unique when it comes to the Build series. In all honesty, and I'm going off topic here, but in all honesty here, when it comes to watching the Build series versus the Gundam franchise, all of it's really lighthearted fun. It's more traditional in line with anime itself, like slice of life kind of stuff, shonen anime and stuff like that, versus what Gundam truly is. And I could see where a lot of fans might not like that a lot because they want a war story. They want really detailed characters, and they don't want these simplistic, almost one-dimensional characters. Granted, a lot of them do change, but sometimes they don't, and I get that. I like that too. But I could tell you this: after watching 30 plus series, movies, OVAs, ONAs, shorts, I could tell you that this is very welcoming. I really, really enjoyed watching, and I'm watching the Build series right now. Like, I'm really enjoying a lot of the Build series stuff. It's something different. Maybe it's because I've watched so much of Gundam right now, I'm having a little bit of a Gundam overload, and something different is nice. That could be it. But at the same time, I had watched the Build series, at least Fighters and Fighters Try, not like after doing a whole Gundam marathon like I'm doing right now. I watched them separately. So when I got them on Blu-ray, I watched them as I watch them like I normally do, or watch anything else. My wife and I sat down, we watched both series. And I really, really liked it. In the same way that I felt about the series when I first time watched it, the same way I still feel about it today. They're really, really enjoyable series. And despite that it's not truly like a Gundam series, I still hold it within the same aspects of the Gundam franchise. It's not going to be the same perspectives, but yeah, that's how I think about that in general. Just trying to get it out there. My true feelings when it comes to the Build series. Back to the review. I apologize. So, yes, Gundam Build Fighters Try is a direct sequel to Build Fighters with a decent 7-year time skip. Now, even though while we have this time skip and some characters do reappear from Build Fighters, we get mostly one character that's reoccurring throughout almost every single episode, And then some characters either have a very brief cameo or like multiple cameos through some episodes. In all honesty, though, between Build Fighters and Build Fighters Try, it's not really a huge requirement to watch Build Fighters first. These series or these two shows are basically two sides of the same coin. You can literally just start on one or the other, and it wouldn't really truly matter. Might have some moments from the first series that might have some relevance towards Try, but in all honesty, it's very different. I do want to say though, and I'm going to try and keep this one really short on this one though, and I usually talk about animation, music, and dubbing, but in all honesty, everything is pretty much the same from there. I mean, it's only been a year since the production of the first series going into the sequel. Not much of the animation has changed. The music pretty much is about the same, and the dubbing, or at least the dubbing in this case, is not terribly bad. It could be better though. This is now, I thought that the dubbing in Build Fighters was pretty bad. I'm going to say Try might be slightly worse. Slightly worse is what I'm going to use. Now, everyone sounds and fits their roles for the most part. It's always going to be that one character or something that just sticks out. So Chino was the character that stuck out in the first series. Sekai is the one that sticks out in this one. So the voice actress that voices for Sekai, for the first like 9 episodes or so, we got an idea what Sekai's voice sounds like, and it fits his character. He's very, very shonen-esque, very like Adam, like go get him and all that stuff like that. But, big but, about the 10th episode past that, when we start getting introduced to like some like foreign characters, like characters that like either came from Britain or like study abroad and something and had a British accent to them, Sekai started having like a weird British accent himself. And the voice actress that has voiced for Sekai doesn't voice for any of the other characters, or doesn't voice for any of the characters that has his British accent. So I got a little bit confused and lost, like, what happened during the dubbing here? What happened to the voicing in the voicing sessions, the recordings? Did they just kind of like whatever and just let this voice actor go about it? Or was there something more to it? I don't know what happened, but past the 10th episode onwards, Sekai kept on going between his normal voice and then this British voice. And I felt like this voice actress kept on breaking. And that was very distracting while watching this series. I mean, like, I hear people when they complain about, like, oh, well, dubs are bad. I'm like, no, dubs are generally good. As long as a voice actor or actress can stick to the tonalities and the way that the character speaks and stuff like that, I don't think we're going to have an issue. This is a very good example of bad voice acting. Or not voice acting, but yeah, well, actually, either bad voice acting or bad dubbing in general. Because shouldn't be breaking a character's voice like that unless they're having some kind of like character change or whatnot, but there's nothing going on with Sekai here, so. Don't know why he started speaking half British at times. And then goes right back to his like shonen-esque voice. I don't understand why, but that was a big break for me. Really, really irritating. Other than that, like I mentioned before too, so two sides of the same coin. Now, with Build Fighters, we focus mostly on single fights or single competitions, right? And that was exciting itself. Try gives it a three times the amount and switches it up. Instead of just doing single fights, they're doing now team battles. Team battles of 3-on-3, basically. Not only do they do team battles of 3-on-3, kind of like similar with the other one where we had like different schools fighting each other, we have now different schools, but more or less different teams from schools fighting each other. So I thought that was really cool, unique, because what it does, unlike the first series has a lot of fun action. Not saying that this series doesn't have fun action, because it does. But it adds a little bit more to the action itself. It adds a little bit more strategy and tactics behind it. Because now we have 3 team members per team. It changes the dynamics of the fights much more than that. So we see different teams utilizing strategies or techniques and really build on towards that like dynamics of the fight itself. We also get a story dynamics between the 3 because the whole entire series is really focusing, there's no one particular main character. Our main characters are literally these 3 right here. And while we go through the entire series, again, very slice of lifey, very shonen-esque, because we are following a building arc towards the tournament arc itself. So just like the first series. But unlike the first series where we're having, I would say this one has a little bit more slice of lifey and not so much these fantasy elements. We're focusing more on the team building between Sekai, Fumina, and Sei. Or not Sei, I'm sorry. Yeah, Sei. So we get this whole team building between them all, and then really trying to develop themselves as characters or develop their own gunpla, their own fighting styles, and working with each other to progress. So I thought that was a little bit more unique compared to what we had in Build Fighters. So I really liked a lot of those elements there. Again, we had the removal of a lot of the fantasy elements from Build Fighters. It's almost like polar opposites, despite they're in the same universe, right? Like we're all this fantasy stuff about like another world or whatnot completely removed. We're keeping it now super grounded into reality, and we're just keeping it to that point. So I thought that was really nice, really fun with that one too. I feel like the series has a lot of G Gundam inspiration, so I was looking into like some of the factoids or trivia about this series, and some of it was just unintentional. But I really get a lot of this, not just a shonen vibe, kind of like I got one with the Build Fighter series, but I get still a lot of G Gundam, especially with Sekai and his star burning. If I'm correct, it's either build burning or star burning. I keep getting them mixed up. But with those particular guns, I just feel like we get a lot of that. It's kind of funny because with these three here, going right back to fighting itself or like different tactics, we have like Sekai being the close range fighter. We have a range combat fighter with Sei, and then Fumina does support basically. So it's kind of interesting. We have that kind of build, feels very MMO-y, kind of, where we have kind of like tank, DPS, and then healer / support. She's not really a healer, but I'm classifying in that manner, right? Now, for some of the negatives about this series, kind of like what I was talking about with Build Fighters itself too, very, very different when you compare it to a Gundam series. Much of this is like slice of lifey and shonen, very different from the war dramas or conflict-driven stories of majority of the Gundam franchise. Just like its predecessor, it's, again, focusing more so about building up towards a tournament itself and just focusing on the lives, the day-to-day lives, the little silly things, the comedic moments, the fun things, right, of our characters. Nothing really serious goes on in this series. Yes, again, serious moments do occur, but it's not like on the same level of gravity of seriousness from any other Gundam series in the Gundam franchise. Build series withstanding. I have to keep referring it to that way. Again, very reminiscent of other anime shows of its nature, where it's more focused on a product and not on the series itself. So keep it in mind, it's this concept of we have the product first and then we're building a series around it, versus how majority of the Gundam series is we have a series and then we're going to build a product around the series. That's majority of the Gundam franchise. So very much of this series or Build Fighters trying is very reminiscent to things like Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Beyblade, those sort of things. In lieu with those in the nature of lightheartedness and just slice of lifey kind of things, with, of course, the action elements and building up towards our tournament. And going right back to the fights too, like I really like, so honestly, I don't care much for Sekai's fighting because much of it reminds me kind of like Shonen, Fist of the North Star, G Gundam kind of things where they're just he's calling out all of his attack moves. Cool in its sense, but I just feel like he's just too hot-blooded and so much into it. But I kind of like not just the fighting overall, but I like the styles between these two here. All three of them kind of meshing very well with each other. But I also like watching other teams, how they fight and how they implement their strategies. Whether or not they are successful or not, I still think it's just, it again, breathes more life into the fighting sequences and makes things a little bit more interesting. I think the only thing that's going to be negative, though, is that if you watch many series like this, though, not exactly like this, but shonen anime or series akin to this, right? A lot of things kind of fall within that cliched feeling, right? Like you're going to be able to call majority of what's going to happen. It's where I always argue, though, it's not about the end of the story or the destination. It's about the journey. And much of it is about the journey in this series that I really do enjoy. Alongside with that journey, again, I love a lot of this slice of life stuff, a lot of the comedic bits. I still find it funny, even though it's a little bit forced, a bit with some of the relationships that Sekai has with some of the female characters or whatnot. Sekai is a brainless twit who only cares about his school and fighting. Not like school, talk about his fighting school. And like the girls that are attracted to him and stuff like that, it's just, I find that kind of funny. I enjoy harem animes for that particular reason too. Sometimes it's just like either the obliviousness or just the comedy between the characters trying to romance this one character. So I just find it kind of fun and lighthearted. It's not super serious with that, but I find those elements just enjoyable. Something we don't get a lot in Gundam. I think the closest one we're going to ever get to it was back in Iron-Blooded Orphans, but that wasn't really played up and felt more forced than this. Now, before I get into any spoiler parts, though, I do, just like the Build Fighter section, there are actually shorts I want to talk about in relation to Try. In particular, so with the Build Fighter series, of course, we have Try right here, but we also have the special edition, which also covers basically the Build Fighters Battlogue, in particular to the, I pointed off to it, but particular to the Try Fighters, or Fighters Try, is the Island Wars. So real quick though, and I kind of mentioned this in my Build Fighters, but if you haven't already heard it, so Build Fighters Battlogue are a series of episodes, 5 short 11-minute episodes, basically telling some like expansion on some of our characters or moments and stories with our characters. While it's not an absolutely necessary watch, some of them are pretty fun, and I just want to kind of go over them. So in relation to Try Fighters, there's actually 3 episodes relating to Try Fighters. In all honesty, though, one of them is kind of like a mix between Try Fighters, or Fighters Try, and Build Fighters, but hear me out on this one. So, yeah. So the second episode, we follow a fun little team matchup between Sei here and then Minato. Not exactly that they're against each other, but they're teaming up to complete a mission together. It was just fun. There's some really nice little references in that episode there, but other than that, it's a nice little addition towards these characters. As when we had ended off, they ended off on some level of terms, but seeing them like revive some things around, which it's just fun, silly little antics. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. And episode 4. Basically, we're following 3 brothers. Actually, we've seen these 2 brothers in the Build Fighter series, and this is where I talk about this is kind of like a merger between the 2, which is a little bit weird. But we have a 3rd brother now. They're doing a little bit of a mission here, and then Yuki does show up later on too. It's a fun and okay fight. It's honestly a skippable episode. It's something I wouldn't even care to rewatch it unless you really, really have to rewatch it, right? But it's skippable for the most part. But the best one. So now, as we talk about the Gundam franchise itself and how everything can be distinct or different or far away, I mean, already Build series is far away from and distant from the Gundam franchise itself, right? In its own little world and its own little storytelling and its own genre. And I'm talking about the Build series overall. So I'm talking about Build Fighters Try. I'll even throw in Divers and Divers Rewrites, even though we haven't reviewed them just yet. But the 4th episode in the Build Fighters Battlogue is the adventures of Fumina and Gyanko. At first, when I heard about the title, I thought, like, oh, okay, so we're going to follow the characters themselves and they're going to have like a nice little slice of life story or try to do some kind of romancing with Sekai or something. No. In fact, we're following Fumina and Gyanko as like Gunpla girls, basically. So they're like in their respective suits from the series, basically, just put onto them. And we follow this, like, it's kind of like a merge between, or like making fun of, or I don't know how you want to put it, but I'm going to take it as an homage and having fun with magic girl stories and fantasy tropes and genres. Mashing them all together, and you get this story about these 2 on an adventure to save a village of bear guys. Yes, saving a village of bear guys. Petite bear guys in more particular, but saving the bear guys. I absolutely love this episode. As far away from everything so far, it's like on the verge of SD Gundam, which I'm not covering, unfortunately, folks. SD Gundam is too far out from the main franchise. This is far enough. This is way far enough. But this one particular episode so far away, it's like, wow, am I really watching Gundam? Even though it's dealing with like Gundams and mobile suits and stuff like that. But you know what? I had a lot of fun watching that particular episode. By far the best Battlogue episode in the entire Build Fighters Battlogue. Best one. I enjoyed it a lot. I had a lot of fun with it. Super, super light, super funny. Just enjoyable overall. I could honestly watch either like an Ona series of that or just a full-on 25 episode series of just those two and their adventures together and more to it. I would totally watch that. If it's so far away from Gundam, I at this point I wouldn't care, and I just enjoy it as it is. It's an anime with Gundam stuff. But yeah, definitely a watch on that one, my opinion. So aside from the Battlogue stuff, we do also have one more thing, which is the Build Fighters Try Island Wars. Now, this is another 30-minute ONA or original net animation, very similar to Build Fighters' other ONA, which is GM's Counterattack. So another short one that's more of a conclusion or like a not a time, but a direct sequel and finishes off. I always think of more of like a supplemental episode that really, really ties in everything very nicely. And just to give you a brief story on that one here too. So our Tri-Fighters gang is invited to test drive Yajima Trading's new battle system. But strange things begin to happen on to the island that they're on and the new battle system in particular. That's it in a nutshell. Very much like the GM Counterattack. It's very much short bit of story, but unlike GM Counterattack, we actually spend a little bit more time with our characters, having again more of that slice of life kind of stuff, a lot of that comedic elements that I actually really, really enjoy. And then we get into the fights. Now, the fighting is not as grandiose and is actually very reminiscing of the final episode of Build Fighters. So it kind of feels a little bit of the same. We kind of have an idea of how it's going to end off, and we already know, but it's just about the journey itself. So the fights itself were fun, interesting. We got to see some newer suits too. But in all honesty, I just enjoyed the entire episode as itself. It was supplemental to Try itself as a, I would say, like a supplemental episode that just adds on more to the epilogue, right? Not saying that we didn't get enough in the final episode. I will talk about that in spoiler section though. But I really did enjoy Island Wars a lot. Definitely something that I will recommend watching that too. If you do watch Try, you might want to add in not just some of the episodes of the Battlogue. You can skip most of those to be honest. But I highly recommend watching at least Island Wars. So that way you have a really nice full completion of watching this series. With that said, let's go ahead and just jump into our spoilers section here. So if you're on our stream, just go ahead and mute me and chill out until you want to get to the final section, and you'll see me remove the banner alert. And for those who want to stick around, let's go ahead and talk about some spoilers here. So there's not a whole lot of spoilers I really want to talk about this series. It's very straightforward with much of the series itself. But it doesn't have as many cameos and homages like the first Build Fighters has. There is still quite a bit though, but not as much. One thing I really, really want to talk about though is the build-up and then the final episode itself. This one's a lot more straightforward than it was in Build Fighters. Try actually completes the story without going into this crazy fantasy stuff. But what I really, really liked about the final episode though is that we got a lot more time. A lot more time of an epilogue with all of our characters. It felt more appropriate. Felt really, really nice. So like we get the kind of like Final Fight-esque, and then the last 15 minutes is just really spending more time with our characters. And that's what I really wanted. I wanted to know what's going to happen to them afterwards. I hate when a series ends after we spent all this time with our characters, building them up, and then we finish up and we don't see the after, right? I wanted to see the payoff of the after. Not just the success, but I want to see the after. we get that with Build Fighters Try. I really like that a lot. Getting a lot of conclusions with a lot of our characters. Some things are still left in the open here, but that's okay. I mean, it wasn't really going to be answered either way, to be honest. But I really liked a lot of the epilogue stuff, getting more time with our characters, and having a lot of fun with the series overall there. But that's all I really want to talk about. Yeah, it wasn't too much of a spoilers to really talk about. I just didn't want to spoil too much about like expectations of what it ends for people who actually don't want to get spoilers about this series. Other than that, let me just go ahead and all right, so let me go ahead and jump into our next little section right here, folks, which is my favorite suits from this series. Now, if you're not familiar with this little segment here, basically with every introduction or new Gundam series into the Gundam franchise, we're introduced to a whole new set of suits, new redesigns, or just redesigns in general, battleships, those sort of things. Just like Build Fighters, though, Fighters Try doesn't really introduce us to a whole lot of new things necessarily, because much of it is literally mobile suits and Gundams from previous series. Now we get feels like kit bashing, and we get a lot of these other types of Gundams or mobile suits that are utilizing a lot of different parts and pieces from other suits and Gundams. So this series does have a lot of redesigns, is how I would like to consider it almost. Some of them are just some outright newer designs. I only have like a handful of them, so let me just go ahead and provide you what I have here. So first and foremost, the top off my list here, unfortunately didn't make it to the final here, was my Bear Guy F, or Bear Guy family. I, again, love my Bear Guys. I got my Bear Guy right here. I still have her. But I love my Bear Guys. In all honesty, I find them very, very super cute, very nice. And the Bear Guy F has a really nice, cute little petite bear guy right behind him. And that thing is a little powerhouse. But I just think that just the overall design is really cute. There isn't too much of a story behind it like China's original Bear Guy, the 3rd, or Bear Guy 3. But it's a really nice suit. I just like it overall. Not too much I want to talk about it, though. My next one I like, and let me just close these one off real fast here. The next one I really like, there's a Argyagya, if I'm saying that one correctly here. And this is a Gyanko's Gyan. Totally souped up. It's more like the Ryarja than a Gyan, but really like Gyanko's suit. Also, Gyanko, best girl. Honestly, I have a hard time picking between Fumina or her as best girl in this series. But yes, outside of like just trying to pick out like, oh, who's the best girl for the series itself, the suit. I really do like this suit's design, even though we don't get to see it a whole lot in this series. We see it in a couple of combat situations, and especially in the last episode. It's a decent compatible suit, but what I really do like about it is just the overall design. Love its sleekness, this regality behind it, and those shields. Really digging those shields. Really nice shields. Other than that, my next favorite one I liked from this series was the Transient Gundam. Really nice looking design. I couldn't tell what was the base levels besides like Gundam 00. I almost want to feel like it has a little bit of age inspiration behind it too, but it probably is just strictly 00. But I just like, again, a lot of detail behind the suit. Very formidable suit too. Very cool. Liked it a lot. So yeah, but if we're going to talk about my absolute favorite now from this series, I didn't think it was going to be that awesome. Its first form was all right, but its second form, I really like the star-winning Gundam. I have an affinity towards SD Gundams. I like how they look because they're kind of cutesy too. Unlike the winning Gundam, where it was a pure support suit and it really couldn't fight on its own, the star winning is capable of fighting on its own while providing still support for others. So I thought that was kind of cool. In addition to that, it was unique that it can actually transform into a Gundam itself. So therein being, because it can transform, it gets an additional win for me. Or in this case, it's really winning my opinion on that. But yes, I really love transformable suits. The SE was cute, so all this plays in. I think the only thing I didn't like though is its armament once it transforms, because all we really had was some of its fin funnels in a sense, and then the winning beam. So I felt like it was very underplayed with what it could do in its real mode. I wanted to see it. I wish it had a little bit more armaments or whatnot, but it's still cool. I love the design overall, very fancy. I usually hate like overbearing knees like this, very similar to the Kyrios or Arios in Gundam 00, but it just really works out for this suit. That's all I gotta say. But I do have one more left, and it's mostly an honorable mention, just throwing it out there into the world. But I really, really do want to say I like the suit a lot, but it's not a true suit. Not a true suit. And they even covered this in the series itself too, but the Super Femina. Lovely design. Love it. I'm gonna have to agree with Minato. There's so much detail and love to the Gunpla itself. Look how smooth the textures are and how it doesn't have any nipper parts or whatnot. And made a Gunpla girl. That's not common, you see. But I just want to make this one an honorable mention. I think this is just, it was a funny one that they threw in there, and I like how they made it in the episode itself. Like, this doesn't qualify as a Gunpla. I mean, like, yes, it's even funny when Yuki was saying, like, Gunpla is freedom, but this is pushing it. This is like beyond Gunpla's freedom. Like, can you even call this Gunpla? This is more like a figurine and not really Gundam. So it's like, you know what? I agree. But you know what? Honorable mention, because it is a model. So I don't know. But that's all I really got to say when it comes to my favorite suits of the series here. Let me go ahead and just pop this spoiler right off here. All right, so now that all the spoilers are done, let me go ahead and jump into my next segment here, which is I'm new to the Gundam franchise. Should I start off with Build Fighters Try? Here's another time I'm gonna break my rules. I feel like I'm breaking my rules quite often. It's only like a few reviews I've broken few reviews I've broken my rules, but I'm gonna say yes again to this series. Yes, you could actually watch Tri Fighters first. Kind of like I mentioned earlier on in the review itself here too. Again, with Build Fighters and Build Fighters Try, they're basically the same side, two sides of the same coin. You can either start with one or the other, and you don't need to watch one or the other first. Granted, Build Fighters will have some things that might have some relevance, more like mentionings in Try. It doesn't really play a huge relevance unless you count towards Island Wars, to be honest. But in all honesty, though, you can watch one or the other. In this case, if you decide to do it Try first, because you might not like the fantasy elements that you hear about in Build Fighters, Try sticks more to the true realism of what it is in real life, in a sense. Again, just like I mentioned with Build Fighters, though, this is a very unconventional Gundam series. It's very different than anything else in the Gundam franchise itself. It's almost verging towards SD Gundam. While it does utilize a lot of Gundams and mobile suits from previous series, a lot of cameos and homages, it's not true to what is expected from a Gundam series itself. Like if you watch a Gundam series, how they correlate with each other in the same tones or stories in a sense. So it doesn't have a lot of the core elements, doesn't have a lot of the story elements, doesn't have a lot of things that are very similar to other Gundam series other than having Gundams and mobile suits. That being said, though, it's a very nice, very easily accessible, very easy to jump into series. Yes, it's not going to be standalone at this point because it is a direct sequel, but as I had mentioned, though, you can literally skip the first series and just jump into this one. You'll be absolutely fine, in my opinion. But yeah, I think this is a great jumping point if you are new to the Gundam franchise and really, in all honesty, do not want to deal with a lot of that story stuff or a lot of the continuity, and that's a lot more of an intimidation factor towards you. I think this would be a great series to really start off on. If you're familiar with the Gundam franchise and everything, I think this will still work out for you in the end. Because again, it's more of an homage, a respect towards the Gundam franchise itself. And you're going to see a lot of stuff in here that when you jump into any other Gundam series, you're going to go like, hey, I remember this character. Oh, I remember this mobile suit or Gundam. Oh, this location looks really, really familiar. Those sort of things. So I think this is a nice little jumping on point for anybody who's brand new into the Gundam franchise. Just know that do not expect, again, separating the Build series from the Gundam franchise itself, do not expect watching a Build series like Tri-Fighter or Fighters Tri and then going into another Gundam series being the exact same thing. They're going to be very different in tonalities and stories and so forth, but really good gateway though. As for an overall, Build Fighters Tri is very similar to that of Build Fighters, while it just basically has a lot more fun with the franchise overall, paying a lot of respect and homage to the Gundam franchise while paving its own way by telling its own story and focusing on its own type of characters and its own way of wanting to cover Gundam. Well, it doesn't have a lot of the tones and seriousness of any other Gundam series. Much of it is focused on the three characters, their team building, their development as characters with each other and as a team together, and of course the fights, which are definitely unique with the 3-on-3 fights with a lot of different strategies and tactics that we don't see in the original series of Build Fighters. I definitely like Build Fighters, highly recommend this series for newbies who are coming into the Gundam franchise and don't really want to get tangled with a lot of the stories or timelines and stuff like that, and just really want to get in there in the most easiest way possible. Definitely a lot of the action and story carries this series in my opinion, and it's just overall generally fun, very lighthearted, and very slice of lifey. So I think it's more in tune with a lot of anime, more mainstream than is with more of a niche kind of a thing. For that though, Gundam Build Fighters Tri gets a solid 4 out of 5. I really did enjoy Build Fighters Tri. I feel like every single time, I can only speak as of like going into the sequel, but they took what worked. So Build Fighters was kind of like an experiment, right? They were testing out some things. They were trying to see what would work out, and they changed it up, right? So when they did Tri, they scrapped all the fantasy stuff for the most part. They kept it more real life based and then focusing more on our characters. So I felt like the sequel is a more of an improved version of Build Fighters. And while I've given them both a very similar scoring, if you're going to ask me which one is better between the two, I liked Build Fighters Tri a whole lot more than Build Fighters. In fact, I would definitely rewatch this series despite some quirks, as I mentioned too, but I would definitely rewatch Tri over Build Fighters. I loved Tri a lot. It was a lot of fun. Enjoyed a lot of the silly antics and the slice of life stuff. And again, like I mentioned, the fights are really fun to watch. A lot more unique compared to Build Fighters because, again, we got different teams with different strategies and different tactics. So it's not just that one-on-one. We're now doing 3-on-3, and we're seeing a lot of variety in those fights. So throw caution to the wind about the cliches. Have a lot of fun with this series. With that being said, if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment down below. I want to hear from you guys. Did you like this series? Did you not like this series? What do you think about my opinions? Do you agree with me? Did you disagree with me? I want to hear from you guys. But yeah, that's all I have for you today on this nerdy review. And until the next nerdy reviews, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.